Hello and welcome to this half episode, perhaps, maybe, I don't know, of How We Fix Britain. Hello to Puninator and Yoni and Colin and Sarah and Roger. Hayton Puds is in there. Yoni, I'm really sorry, but Mike and I agreed to do this last week when we were at the anti-Brexit, the Rejoin March in London, and I think Mike might have forgotten. I don't know. I've texted him all day going, Mike, are you coming? Are you going to be on the show tonight? He might get the message and agree to do the show at 9 o'clock. I don't know. But in the meantime, should we do a Q&A? Who was suggesting a Q&A? That was Hayton. Hey hun Puds. Do you want to do a Q&A? Should we do an EU-based Q&A? I'll just rely on what you're going to say in the chat, because I'll probably end up making this video unlisted or something after doing it, because this isn't actually episode 5, but I felt really bad because you were here, I was here, we were all ready to go. Wait till I get my hands on you, Galsworthy. Although I have to say, Mike did come to Liverpool to talk at the Shipper Mitre a couple of weeks ago, which was awesome. Emergency live stream, says Cattle OG. Well, no, it was supposed to be trying to get this together for bloody ages. We haven't done a How We Fix Britain since before the election. I want to be doing these every week. Oh no, do a Sunday night monologue, Graham. Well, we could talk about Sue Gray resigning as the chief of the cabinet person. We could talk about what the madness is going on in the United States of America right now, but it'd probably be more appropriate for us to talk about how we're going to get back into the EU. So maybe we can have a bit of a Q&A. And okay, I'll say when we do have the show with Mike, when we do episode 5, tell me what you would like me and Mike to talk about, what questions you would like us to answer. He might get the message. Plum Duff says the USA election is nerve-wracking. That is putting it mildly, Plum Duff. I am absolutely freaking terrified. I don't know if you saw on Friday night when I was discussing it with Scott and then with Mikey, but like, I can believe, but like, it is heartbreaking just how popular Donald Trump is in America. It's just like, it's the same to me as Gary Glitter going back to number 1 in the pop charts, or Rolf Harris being like re-inducted as a national treasure somehow, or I don't know. It's like, a serial killer literally being made prime minister, and you're like, how, what? Who's supporting this serial killer? Oh, life was great under the serial killer. Yeah, you really knew who you were. You knew what bathroom to use. Oh, my God. David's in the chat. Hello. Anyone got any questions? The first thing needs to be done is to reform the press regulations. Otherwise, any chance of joining the EU is nil. That's from Chrissy. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I really hope, I don't know if you watched Phil's video today where he's talking about Sue Gray resigning. I really hope this isn't as a result of pressure from the tabloid newspapers, the Express, the Mail, the Telegraph, the Times. I know that's not supposed to be tabloids, but they are. The gutter rags. Puninator, I'd like you to discuss the best ways we can convince ex-Brexiteers rejoining is worth it. I know some people who voted to leave, know Brexit failed, but feels the EU hates us now. Yeah, I mean, I feel like with the EU, they're just going to do what they do, and we've asked them to treat us as a third country. And the problem is that if they're too nice to us and make special exceptions for us, first of all, people won't notice as much. They won't go, oh yeah, this is really bad. This is much worse than it used to be. And so they'll just think, well, Brexit's kind of working, I guess, if my quality of life hasn't really diminished that much. But the other worry is other countries in the EU might see Britain doing all right and go, oh, well, maybe we shouldn't be part of the EU anymore, which is terrifying because we need the EU, because the EU has made the continent of Europe more peaceful than it's been for centuries, millennia, maybe. I mean, like, we haven't had a war against France or Germany or Spain or Italy since the Second World War. Like, that they've arguably made it so it's incredibly difficult and stupid and counterproductive to declare war on your neighbours because you trade with them and you're not really competing with them for the resources on the same level that we were in the run up to World War One and Two. It's a bit more of a level playing field, and people feel like the continent is theirs in the same way that Americans feel like the whole country of America is theirs. Doesn't matter which state you're born in, you're still American. And I think it should be the same in Europe. Doesn't matter what European country you're born in, you should be European and you should feel European. So, as far as the EU is concerned, I think they've got a bit of a tightrope to walk. But as for convincing Brexiters that they're wrong, I don't know. I found it really, really difficult. Like, I always say it's tough enough to get someone to change their mind when you know them. When they're a friend or family member, it's hard enough. But to get someone you don't know to change their mind is really, really difficult. But I am a little bit inspired by the right-wing trolls that you get on TV. On the internet more than TV, I guess. So what they'll do is, you get a lot with this with the incel crowd. They'll do videos about TV shows, pop culture, movies, that kind of thing. And they'll make funny videos, like funny reviews of films. And they'll do some where they go, oh, I really like this film. And they'll do some other reviews where they're like, oh, this film was rubbish. And because they're witty and entertaining, they get people on board. And then over time, they start dripping misogyny and, derogatory stereotypes about people from different countries or whatever right-wing tropes that they personally believe and try and get out there. But by then, a lot of people have already captured. They've already gone, oh yeah, I quite like watching the videos by this guy. He seems to have his head screwed on. It might be a woman, actually. She seems to have her head screwed on. And so I think that might be a more clever way of going at it, because no one who voted for Brexit watches this channel, I don't think. Like, I don't think they really watch Phil's stuff either, unless they've changed their mind already. So I think it might be an idea to have a channel that's more sort of entertainment based, but then you slide in little digs about the EU. And one way I've thought of that for me is by having a sister channel to this, where I talk about my travels. But I do it a little bit through the lens of when I was traveling around the world 15 years ago, I was a lot freer and had a lot more options than I do today. And just mention it in every episode. Mostly it'll be about me, getting on the wrong bus in Uruguay or something. But like that'll be the focus of the episode. But I will mention in the voiceover or something like that, this isn't something that would be a problem in Europe. Well, it wouldn't have been before Brexit. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to read some of your chats here. Sarah says, in capital letters, so I have to read it out loud, we won't be able to rejoin. No, stop that. We won't be able to rejoin until the right side Brexiters agree that rejoining is the best way to go, as any deal done under Labour Party, the Tories will undo. That's absolutely correct, Sarah. However, it doesn't stop us moving closer to Europe. So, Erasmus, regulatory alignment, the mutual recognition of qualifications, an outer orbit of the single market, which covers some things but doesn't cover others. Same with the customs union. I mean, all of these are steps back towards the youth mobility scheme. All these are steps back towards our place in Europe. And the youth mobility scheme, it's nothing new. We've had it for years for citizens of America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, other countries. A youth mobility scheme where you can get a 4-year visa. If you're Australian, you can do it now. You can get a 4-year young person's visa to come and live and work in the UK. And then, if you've got family from here, you can get an ancestral visa, which is another 2 years on top of that. Then you have to make sure that your partner's earning at least £38,600 a year, or you're going to have to both move to Australia or some other country, because you can't stay here. Instead of Gulliver's Travels, Graham's Travels. Yeah, that'd be quite cool. And Boris is trying to flog his book. He is shameless. Did you see the interview? He did an interview with ITV, and the guy interviewing said, I think it's Anthony Sheldon, is it? The guy who writes the sort of the biographies of British prime ministers. I'm probably getting the name wrong. And apparently he basically said that Boris Johnson was like the worst prime minister in history. And the newscaster, the presenter, said this to Boris Johnson. He said, "Oh, this guy says you're the worst prime minister in history. What do you think of that?" I just laughed my head off. It was well funny. George, why is Starmer trying to cherry pick? Well, George, thank you for the super chat. And I'm going to go. I think that you're right. Oh, that is covering my face. That's not optimal, is it? Go over there. I think you're right. He is trying to cherry pick, but I can see why. And I know that might sound a bit, I don't know, a bit sort of like, oh, I'm just making excuses for them. And obviously, I'd like to rejoin tomorrow, but I understand what Sarah was just saying about, like, the Tories to just take us back in. And the EU is not going to stand for that. It's going to stand for this hokey-cokey. But I'll stand by what I said about making steps back towards Europe. Like, every step that we take over the next few years, in terms of our relationship with Europe, will hopefully take us one step closer to rejoining one day. So we've got two factors, I think. We've got the political factors, the actual getting closer to Europe and all that kind of thing, the diplomacy, that's got to be done. But also, and this is really, really important, going back to what Sarah said, we need to get people on side. And think of clever ways of getting people to enjoy our content. Other people other than me making content which is like car repair or movie reviews or whatever. Like car repair would be a good one, actually. So if you could have a really good car repair channel where they take an old wreck and they make it really good again, those channels are brilliant. I mean, they can be really, really addictive. And if you had a presenter on that channel now and again saying, oh, I'd like to be able to get this car part, but since Brexit, the amount they have to pay to get the car part has actually doubled and it's not worth getting it. So I'm going to have to make my own out of papier-mâché and spit. Sarah says it's crazy that our blue passports, if they weren't a person, they would be able to get a European passport, yet the holder can't. Bloody blue passport. Shite. The EU cannot allow the UK to have what we want without the UK complying with EU rules and regs, says Patrick. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. We're living in very volatile times, says Plumduff. Yeah, but we don't need to be, do we? Like, honestly, if it's as simple as this, if Trump loses this election, or, third time lucky, hopefully that's it. I mean, it might not be, but, like, we can just relax. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is the fact that so many people are voting to cause, like, the vast majority of people on this planet, like, so much stress, so much distress, is it's not great, is it? EU firmness on no cherry picking is the best leverage. Rejoiners have to force Starmer to ditch the ridiculous red lines on EEA, SM, freedom of movement, let alone rejoining EU. Yeah, but Nick, he mentioned the red line in the run-up to the election, so they can say, oh, we've got a mandate from the people to do this. That's the worry. Moving on, we've got, yes, the Doom Critical Drinker and Smack Talk are some that do what you described, says Crispin. Yeah, they get people on because they're funny and people go, oh, he's a funny guy, I'll listen to his funny things. And then after a few episodes, they'll start going on about how much they hate a particular woman for existing. Plum Duff and Ukraine needs more support from that Putin nutter. Yeah, Plum Duff, absolutely. And if Trump gets in, that's off the table. Which is really, really, really concerning to a lot of us. I just want my European passport back. Plum Duff. Me too. We've also got, is Galsworthy coming, says Gary Arnold. No, I don't think so. I don't know. He hasn't texted me back. I texted him earlier today. I texted him at 12 o'clock today saying, are we all good for 8 o'clock tonight? And he's not come back to me. So yeah, I made the thumbnail. I got it all ready, and it's not happening. It's not happening. So yeah, this is a bit of an abortive how we fix Britain, unfortunately. But I'm going to chat with you for a little bit, and I'll probably piss off about past, if that's okay. Subliminal messages, says Sarah. Yes, that's the way we do it. But no, I mean, I think there's also in the messaging, it can't all be doom and gloom. Like, one of the big mistakes that I feel the Remain movement made before the referendum was that it was all doom and gloom. It's like, don't vote for it, you will all die. And they didn't make a very good case, or didn't even try to make our case, for how great the EU is, like how remarkable it is, how awesome it is, the freedoms that it gives us. They wibble on about trade and deficits and the economy, and people just turn off. I mean, I just find it boring. Like, I don't want to really talk about that. I mean, I'll talk about it in very simple ways. Like, I'll say, well, you know, we're free to trade with the rest of the world. Great. But then you put the GDP of all 54 countries of Africa together, and it's less than the GDP of France. You can do that now if you want. I know GDP isn't the perfect way of, well, it's not even nearly perfect way of seeing the wealth of a nation, but it gives you some idea of what you're dealing with, how many people in that country or continent you might be able to sell shit to. And when one country in Europe has a bigger GDP than an entire continent, it's a bit of a worry, especially as that continent has no advanced economies, according to the IMF, as does the Caribbean, South America, Latin America, including Central America, no advanced economies. Apart from, you know, Puerto Rico and UK Virgin Islands and British Virgin Islands, because they're part of other countries. But yeah, in the whole of Asia, there's eight countries in like the whole continent of Asia, which are seen as advanced economies. And most of the stuff that we sell only goes to advanced economies. However, I don't think that's a particularly great argument for people, because it's not emotive. It doesn't make people feel good, bad, indifferent. I don't know. I people go, well, I don't trade stuff. You know, I don't sell things to Poland or to Bhutan. Like, I don't care. So yeah, the better argument would be about stuff like youth mobility and the freedoms of our children to go and live and exist in another country, like, live and get married and start a business and stuff like that. And that's more of a human connection. So yeah, maybe push that one as well. Alan Jackson said, we need to get mini roundabouts painted blue with yellow stars around the edge. We boss. Paul says, where's Mike? Came here for lovely. Well, I came here for lovely Mike as well, but yeah, I've got no message. I've got a message from my mum, which is nice, but I haven't got a message from Mike yet. So I'm probably gonna drop out at past. Sorry, forgive me. I'll be back in the morning at 9:30 for morning brew. Sarah says, if Cliff Richard wrote the song Summer Holiday, he would have to say we're all going to sit in passport control for hours. Pygmalion says, live on a Sunday. Yes it is. Gutters, I like Mike. Yeah, I know, I like Mike as well. Sorry. I'm really sorry. We were going to do it last week, but both of us were knackered after the march and everything and going to Liverpool for the conference and stuff. Well, I went to Liverpool for the conference. Mike went just to give us a boost. So, yeah, at the live event that we did in Liverpool. So, yeah, I don't know. He's busy. He's got a family. He's got shit going on, guys. It's not like we get paid for this. Duke Vengeance, well, unless you throw loads of super chats at us. Duke says, this is going to sound a bit funny coming from me, but I'm also a bit pissed with the EU because of all the shit, the right wing coming in. The EU didn't try to defend themselves. Yeah, the EU didn't make a case for us staying in the EU in 2016, and I think they should have done. I think they absolutely should have done. They said, oh, no, we shouldn't get involved. But yes, you should get involved. You know, it's like just someone making a decision on the behalf of people who are European citizens, EU citizens, living here, and they didn't get a vote in it. If you were a Commonwealth citizen, if you were from Tuvalu or Mauritius or Turks and Caicos, yeah, you could get a vote. You could vote on whether we should stay in the EU or not. But if you were from France or Germany or Spain and you'd lived here for decades, you couldn't have a vote. Why doesn't Reeves shift their attention to the greatest enabler, tax avoidance and evasion, the secret judiciaries of offshore bank accounts and trusts, said Alan Barker? I don't know. That's a straight answer for that. I have no clue. I think we'll go after them. The EU got involved, would have jumped on it, says Alan Jackson. Well, that's the argument, but at the same time, if they had pushed the positive things about what the EU has done, like, I didn't see anything at the time about what the EU did for Liverpool, for instance. Like, I didn't see any adverts, I didn't see any billboards. You know how Facebook now, if anyone's still trudging through the tragic wasteland of despair that is Facebook, they have loads of pictures now where it's like, here's what a street in your town looked like in 1900, and now here's what it looks like. And generally, it's a beautiful old, building done in like the Spanish missionary style, and then it's been replaced by a concrete block. But there was nothing like that where they had a picture of what Liverpool looked like in 1997 and what it looked like in 2008. And I think that would have been really effective, because in 1997, the city centre of Liverpool was an absolute shithole. Whereas in 2008, when we had the European Capital of Culture, after nearly £2 billion of European money was pumped into the city, we had a whole new city centre. And they just didn't make much of it. In the same way that you'll get like a sports stadium or arena or a library or some, civic art or whatever. And they would have like a little tiny little plaque or an airport. You'd have a little tiny little plaque, regional development fund. Almost like it was embarrassed that the EU would pay for this. I mean, that if it had been paid for by or put together by a politician, they didn't pay for it themselves, but they'll put their name on the stadium, they'll put their name on the station, they'll put their name on the roundabout, so it was them. It was them who sorted it out for you. But the EU seemed to be reticent, and seemed to be quite embarrassed about having to help out areas of the UK, which I can understand in a way, because it shouldn't have to. Britain's one of the most richest countries in the world. It's just that nearly all our money is concentrated in 1% of the population who have it through ancestral wealth, which came from slavery and empire. Anyway, moving on. Grumpy Sapper says the EU have a huge axe to grind. They are narcissists and unelected. What, you mean the European Parliament is unelected? That body that we elected MEPs to for 20 years. That's unelected. Oh, right, okay. All right, my partner stood for being in the European Parliament, and pretty sure people voted for her. I mean, I'm sure I wasn't hallucinating that. I'm pretty sure that Nigel Farage was elected. People voted for him, and Claire Semtex Fox, a woman who thinks that men should be free to download child porn. She's in the House of Lords now. The House of Lords, which is not elected. Right. Do you know who else is in the House of Lords? Ian Botham, and you've probably never heard of him. He's famous for once he accidentally tweeted a picture of his cock. I don't know what else he's done. He's in the House of Lords, unelected for life. Oh, and Lord Lebedev, who is, Lord of Siberia. He's in the House of Lords for life, as is Charlotte Owen. And no one knows who she is or what she's done. Maybe she tweets the picture of her cock as well on Twitter. Who knows? But it's a bit rich. The people who went on about this so-called unelected European Union, which elects MEPs who vote on everything. And don't forget, once it's been voted on, it has to be voted on again in our parliament, or parliaments across the EU, to make it part of their law. And that's what we did. And we didn't backheal any of them, because it wasn't really party political. It was just kind of boring shit to do with classifications of bananas. But that seemed to upset people at a very, base level. People who read the Mail, so people who have, suffered from lead poisoning all their lives. And they got very, very emotional about the classification of different bananas. They didn't want their bananas to be classified, because they felt like, the bananas that you buy in the supermarket, they should all be the same or not the same. I'm never quite understood this. I don't know if they were supposed to be bendy or not bendy, but the idea was you had classifications of them, and so you had 3 different boxes to throw them into, and the ones that went off to the banana biscuit factory, they were the most unattractive ones, which are still fairly decent bananas to eat, but you weren't trying to sell them in a supermarket amongst other bananas that didn't look like shriveled up monkey fingers or whatever. But anyway, yeah, so that's just very strange when people say the EU is undemocratic or unelected. And you're like, I'm pretty sure they have a parliament. Pretty sure we elected people to that parliament. I mean, it was embarrassing what the Brexit lot did, the UKIPers, the Brexiters, Farage and all his mates. They were very, very disrespectful and well, what you expect from privately educated mafia that run this country. It's just the way they are. George, Cameron told Barnier not to get involved. Cameron, privately educated dickhead, who, thank you very much for the super chat though, who, I blame him for Brexit basically happening. He didn't have a plan, didn't have a clue. He had another guy who was the leader of Labour at the time and didn't give a shit about whether we were in or out of Europe. He didn't care that it would make the poorest people in this country even poorer. I don't know, people think he was a socialist and everything. Yoni, lying about the EU was nothing new, Duke. British politicians have been doing that for decades. Yep, they absolutely have. And now that they can't blame everything on the EU, these same ghouls have changed their tack, and now they attack trans people because they're the cause of all the problems in your life. Weirdly. Chris C, a lot of the old mining towns receive funding from the EU to help with regeneration, something that Thatcher and Major didn't bother with. Absolutely. And those mining towns voted to leave because no one told them this. And they've been drip-fed lies from the foreign-owned media, the Russian-owned media, the Bahamas-owned media, the American-owned media, the Australian-owned media in this country. It's hardly ever British-owned. They've just been fed the diet of lies for many, many years. Boris Johnson was the Telegraph correspondent, I think, for Brussels, and he's the one who made up all the bullshit about them getting rid of all condoms would have to be tiny sizes. They were going to get rid of all the playgrounds at one point. That was on the front cover of the Mail, I think. They were going to get rid of the bendy banana thing is the mind blowing one for me. That so many people were taken in by that and went, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." What's your problem? What's your problem with the bananas? Oh, I want bendy bananas. Okay, you can get them from the supermarket. They're the ones that now they're just too straight. You want bendy ones. Weird people. Stephen says Conservatives used to be pro-EU and could go back to being that way. Labour always at best lukewarm, so I doubt we'll be allowed back in until Labour is disbanded, says Stephen. I don't think that's the case. Chris says a lot. Oh, I've read that one. Scott says, let's all agree that the whole Brexit debacle was a shit show from start to end. That's the problem when you don't do due diligence prior to initiating it. Yeah, absolutely, my friend. Couldn't agree more. Nick says, fighting undeliverable sunlit uplands fantasies that were rarely ever robustly challenged by journalists with empirical, less exciting facts was always going to be an uphill battle. Yeah, it was, Nick. And that's why I think that we should have made more of a effort to make the positive case for staying in the EU, which we didn't do. And now we can. Now we have the opportunity to make that positive case. And so when I'm talking about the EU, I always try and say, this is, I know it's tempting to say things are a bit shit now because of Brexit, but I always think it's important to talk about the things we could get back and the things that we could improve on in this country if only we were members of the European Union. But then we go back to things like, I don't know, our friend who thinks that the EU is undemocratic there probably won't like this, but, if we were still part of the EU, we wouldn't have such a shortage of medicines. Now, let me be clear, there is a medicine shortage across the EU at the moment, but they're short of a handful of medications around Europe, whereas we in the UK are short of about 80 different medicines now, including medicine like Creon, which is for patients with cystic fibrosis, or people with cystic fibrosis, people who are suffering from diabetes need that as well. That's very, very hard to get. You've also got the medication taken by people with ADHD, which is also very difficult to get now. And those problems in the pipeline wouldn't be such a problem if we were still part of the EU. And essentially, everything's got more expensive. Everything's got more expensive. Like, how much is a pint of beer now compared with how much it was before we left the EU? That's a really simple one that you can just look at and go, yeah, it was about £2.60 for a pint of beer in my local. It went back in 2016. Now it is £5.60. Like, it has more than doubled in cost, a pint of beer. And I'm like, that's really obvious to me. That is like one of the most obvious things that has happened since we left the EU. And I know that it's not just us leaving the EU that's caused that price hike, but can't get away from the fact that when we were part of the EU, beer was cheaper. Beer was substantially cheaper. Nick says, rejoin pragmatism needs to take hold. Yes, Nick, I agree. I feel like I'm quite pragmatic about this. Article 49 can't be triggered until there's unanimity. I can't say that. Amongst all MSs, which won't, MPs, which won't happen until there's a UK government elected on a rejoin manifesto focused on EEA and single market for now. Yeah, I agree to an extent, but asking for unanimity amongst MPs, I mean, we're almost there. I mean, it's just like we have over 500 MPs now in Parliament out of the 650 people who stand in Parliament. 500 of them voted Remain in the fraudulendum. I mean, that's not nothing. Your regular reminder, this is from Nick again, main reason for the dramatic devolution of the UK passport is due to the separate decisions to leave the EA, not the EU. Starmer's red lines prolong that devaluation. It's true. Duke Vengeance, I could cry. It's just so sad to see how the UK is turned into now. Well, you know what? The UK is still here, and we're still here, and we're not going to shut up. We're not going to go away. We saw 15,000 people come out last weekend at the Rejoin March, which I thought was remarkable. I didn't expect there to be that many people there. We were helped by the weather and the fact that we have a substantial number of people who are willing to go out, get to London on a Saturday and say, no, we want to be part of the EU. And obviously it's nowhere near the size of the marches that we had when we were fighting Brexit before we actually left, when we had 1 million people in London, which on these marches, which are just insanely huge. However, the fact that there is still this hardcore of people who are not giving up and will never give up. And this is the thing. There was never a march for Brexit. There wasn't one. There was the walk. Do you remember the walk from Sunderland to London? The walk to leave, the march to leave, and there was about 10 people there and a dog. A whippet. Do you remember that? Dickhead Farage on his open-top bus at the beginning of it. And they walked all the way to London in March 2019, and then we didn't leave, and they all petered off and went home. I don't know. It was a bit sad. It was a bit pathetic. There wasn't 15,000 people there. I'm just saying, like, the will to, you know, the will amongst the normal people to leave the EU really wasn't there. I mean, people might go and vote for Farage, but that's about it. They won't go out and march. They won't go out and actually get off their asses and become an activist because of this. Whereas on our side, people were like, oh my God, this is going to absolutely disrupt my life. This is going to destroy our family and, you know, the hopes and dreams that we had. We wanted to live together in this country with my wife or husband from Germany or France or Italy or Spain or Greece and raise our children here. We can no longer do that because of Brexit. And I wanted to look after my family. I wanted to look after my elderly parents in their later years of their life. But I can't do that because that would mean abandoning my children in another country because I can't live in this country with my husband or my wife and my children because Brexit won't let me anymore. And that's just, you know, that millions of people in this country have gone through that. They've gone through not just people who have lost their hopes and dreams and, you know, their plans for their life have been disrupted because of Brexit, but also the number of friendships, the number of relationships that are broken down because of Brexit is absolutely abhorrent. Like, Brexit is it's an evil. It is just a ball of solid evil that was bowled at us at breakneck speed by the toffs, the privately educated toffs that run everything in this country. And going back to my speech last week at the march, they're not affected by this. If they want to have a German wife or a French wife or a Spanish husband, they can still do that. They earn enough money each year to have someone from another country live with them in this country. The vast majority of us don't. I mean, £38,000. What the Like, seriously, the average earnings in this country is 27,000. So that's something that has been taken away from all of us that aren't born with a silver spoon up our ass or aren't incredibly lucky in some way to be earning that kind of money. And yeah, the amount of heartache, cruelty, depravity that has resulted come as a result of Brexit. And the thing that really sticks in my craw is the people who told you to do it: Boris Johnson, Dominic Cummings, Nigel Farage, Aaron Banks, Richard Tice. They all went to private school. They were all born with a silver spoon up their arses, and they aren't affected by the same shit that we are. This was just screw the plebs. Let's laugh and eat popcorn and watch the plebs screw themselves over, because this doesn't affect the toffs at all, because they can afford the visas to go and live in any of those countries in Europe that we, the rest of us, can no longer go and live in, ever. I'm never going to be able to. I'm 45. My student loan gets written off later this month, because I've never earned enough to have to pay it back. Great. Which, in a way, I think, cool, dodged a bullet there. And don't worry, it was all bought, because I had a 90s student loan, it was all bought by a private company, so they paid the government for buying these loans, so it's not coming out of the taxpayers' money. The taxpayers already been paid back my loan, and this private company is not going to get it back, which is it's kind of cool, but at the same time, it's kind of a bit heartbreaking that, you get this far in life, and you do all the stuff I've done, and yet it's so difficult to just earn enough to have to pay back your student loan. Anyway, moving on. Chatty Rat, to join the EU, the UK will have to apply to the 4 pillars of the Copenhagen criteria, plus implement all 35 chapters of the Community Acquis, plus all EU 27 must say yes. Chatty Rat, so what? Like, I don't mean, I know that sounds a bit sort of dismissive, and I don't mean it like that. I'm just saying, like, so what? Like, yeah, okay. So we'll do it. I don't see that as a barrier. I look at that and go, okay, well, we've got to do this stuff. It's like saying, oh, in order to win this race, you've got to run the fastest. Okay, fine. Well, I'll run the fastest then. But we're not even going to think about sorting that shit out until we've sorted out this fundamental problem in this country at the moment, which is only about 50% of the country want to rejoin the EU. It needs to be at least 66%. And it needs to be absolutely a done deal. It needs to be a supermajority wanting it. It needs to be a supermajority of politicians asking for it. It needs to be absolutely politically settled. Once it is politically settled, then we can start worrying about the crossing the T's and dotting the I's. Until we all agree, Graham, easier to say, says Alan, yes. Cost of coffee now charge over £4 for an Americano, probably not due to Brexit, but it annoys me. Probably is due to Brexit. Duke Vengeance, the worst part, some of these bastards will still vote Tory. Oh yeah, absolutely. Sugar-free, no one ever brings up the fact that the referendum was advisory. It did not have to be enacted, so it was purely political. It was political purely that. Yes, sugar-free. However, in the 2017 manifesto of the Tory party, they said that they were going to carry out Brexit, and they won. Although they didn't win a majority, an absolute majority, they had to go in with the DUP. So there's a bit of grey area there. But then in 2019, the idiot, moron, just dickheads who ran the Liberal Democrat parties and the Liberal Democrat Party and the Labour Party at the time agreed to have an election in the middle of winter against Boris Johnson. And they got a thumping great majority of 80 seats. And I know that our political system is flawed, but it's the political system we've got. And the rule is, if you go in with your manifesto and you get the most seats, you become the government, and then you have a mandate for your manifesto. And unfortunately for us, in their manifesto was this incredibly hard Brexit that they wanted. So, I've argued with Femi about this enough, because he goes, well, it wasn't a democratic vote, because obviously in the fraudurendum, it was advisory and everyone cheated. And I love that excuse, by the way, when we talk about the fraudurendum and I go, leave.eu broke the law, vote leave broke the law, Leave broke the law. They all broke the law. If it hadn't been an advisory referendum, it would have had to be rerun. And then someone said to me, oh, but they all broke the law. Remain broke the law because they sent a booklet to everyone saying that this bad thing would happen if we left. I'm like, no, the government sent a booklet to everyone's home explaining what would happen if we voted to leave. And they were right. And this happens with all just because we're not used to having referendums, I guess we just didn't know about this, I guess. But this happens in Ireland, it happens in Switzerland, where there's going to be a referendum, the government send you a booklet and tell you all about the referendum, because that's their job. It's not cheating. But even if it had been cheating, even if the Remain lot had broken the law, okay, so we rerun it then, yes? Because you don't have a running race where all competitors are off their tits on drugs and they all run dead fast and they all set new world records, even the person who comes last. And we find out that they're all pumped full of steroids. Do we say afterwards, well, because they were all cheating, we'll let the result stand? Do we? Bollocks. Take those medals off them and ban them from running ever again. Anthony Fisher, I feel like we need a stronger Labour behind Rejoining, even with a majority this big. I feel Starmer and Labour are spooked by Brexit and the press. Anthony, I agree with you, and having spoken to a number of MPs last week at the Labour Party conference, I've got to say, there just wasn't the kind of... there wasn't a real spirit for... an appetite, that's a better word. There wasn't much of an appetite for even talking about reversing Brexit. And that's a big problem. Even amongst people who a few years earlier had shared platforms with me explaining how much of a disaster Brexit was going to be for this country. Not least because it was going to make beer cost twice as much. I can't afford to get drunk these days. I mean, never mind buy a house or buy a car or, have kids. What a time to be alive, eh? What a time to be alive. David says, Graham, I don't understand why politicians make the campaign stop the boat when the whole country knows Britain needs immigration in massive numbers. Because it's easy to say those people are bad and you got to hate them. Scapegoats, Nick says, ignore the Article 49 zealots. I will ignore whoever I want, my friend. I'm told who to ignore. But Barnier made it clear that only May's red lines, now adopted by Starmer, prevented UK remaining in the EEA third pillar post-Brexit. Look, it's fine. Look, we can negotiate that, but I still think that we need to push the idea of closer ties with the EU. And that will lead, hopefully, slowly, but surely back into eventually rejoining the EU. I see it as a 10, 15-year project, but we need to be putting the seeds down now. And this is why I think that the National Rejoin March is important. And the fact that people are still kicking up a stink about it and mentioning it whenever possible, saying, why is the beer costing so much? I mean, I think that it would be worth thinking of campaigns that do that kind of thing, where you point this stuff out to people. It didn't cost this much when we were in the EU. The way that people always go on about the past as like being this amazing place, and the 1950s when people still had rickets and died of smallpox, and you could rape your wife and that was legal for some reason, but you couldn't be gay, as this kind of like wonderful time. Also they had rationing. There's this wonderful halcyon time, kids were real kids and adults were real adults or something like that, and you knew which bathroom to use. You've seen that toxic nostalgia bullshit all over Facebook and other places online, and let's tap into that. Let's just go on about how much better things were when we were in the EU. Have you seen how many homeless people there are now? It wasn't like that when we were in the EU. Hey, you've seen all the stuff they built in Liverpool city centre. No, they haven't built anything, not since we had the EU. When we were in the EU, we were building stuff all the time. It looked boss. Now it's like, they just left it all to rack and ruin. Because there's no EU money anymore. Just go on about it all the time. Every time you get an opportunity to mention it to someone. Potholes in the road. There weren't this many potholes when we were part of the EU. I mean, they don't all have to be true. I don't care. It's just making that point, isn't it? Like, well, do you remember when things were better? Do you remember when things were nicer? Do you remember the things were cheaper? Yeah? Do you remember when your weekly shop didn't cost £123? Do you remember that? Yeah. That was when we were part of the EU. That was great, that, wasn't it? Yeah. I need to get a new hat. Right? And this hat I've had since 2019, I think. So it's a good 5 years old. It's I had a look at how much they are, and I swear to God, it's an Australian hat. It's an Aussie hat. It shouldn't really have anything to do with the EU, really. But here's the fact: it used to be £50 pounds for a hat like this. Now it's £75. The exact same hat. And that has gone up that much. It's gone up 50% in 5 years. And the only thing I can think of is the first this hat here I got in 2019. So we can say, well, you know, I remember hats were, you know, fraction of the cost they are today. Scott says needs to be no politicians that are currently in Parliament to have gone before any hope of rejoining the EU. No, I don't see that, Scott. I don't joining the EU. I don't think we need to do that. I don't think we need to have like a purge of all of MPs in order to get back into Europe. I think it's just, you know, step by step, we rejoin Erasmus, we rejoin the Euratom project, we rejoin these things that we can join as, you know, a European country, and we forge better relations with our EU counterparts. And at the same time, while our politicians are doing that, and Labour are doing that, to be fair to them, and they were quite harsh about Labour's attitude towards the EU on this channel, but, you know, give them some due. They're trying at least a little bit harder than the Tories. Not as much as we would like, but they are trying. I think that, you know, that there's that, and then there's us. There's us keeping the pressure on and pointing this shit out every opportunity. You know, when stuff gets posted to you from Europe, it used to cost just the postage. Now you have to pay extra on top of it. Can we put Nigel Farage in a Wicker Man? Ooh, that'd be great. Despite our new trading agreement with the Aussies, says Alan Barker. That is very good point, Mr. Barker. Yes, I agree. Despite our fabulous new trading agreement with the Aussies, which says that they can sell 20,000 tons of beef to us every year, tariff-free. And how much beef can we sell them? Zero, my friends. Zero. That's what we can. That's what we can sell them. Fitchum said, I used to be a heavy drinker. I could handle loads of pints. It's just occurred to me that at today's prices, I need to spend about 30 quid just to get merry. Yeah. Do you know what people say? You know, a bit of a lightweight, Graham. You know, take a few pints and you're drunk. And I'm like, great. Keeps it cheap. Weird things about men, especially like masculinity of like, you know, it cost me £100 to get drunk. I'm like, cool. So that's £100. That's £70 more than me. Great. Actually, back in the day, £5 would do, you know, before Brexit, for the dark times. Nick says 10 to 15 years is for the full Article 49 process. EEA or EFTA or third pillar can happen a lot sooner with enough political will. I think it could happen a lot sooner than that. Once the will is there, it could happen very, very quickly because we were a former member. And I don't think we're going to get all the perks that we used to have. We're certainly not going to get a rebate. But the EU doesn't want a rival sitting on its doorstep. Simple as that. I would rather much have us in the tent pissing out than out of the tent pissing in. Anthony Fisher, £2 super chat. Thank you very much. £73 to go for a new hat. Sorry, it's not much. Oh, Anthony, thank you so much for that. No, it's everything towards the new hat is it's gladly received. I don't know what I'm going to do about it actually because I wasn't expecting it to be that much. So I looked into getting this hat cleaned. This hat needs to be cleaned. And I went to Johnson's, the cleaners, and said, how much to clean this? And they went, 40 quid. And I was like, oh God, it's 50 quid to buy a new bloody hat. You know what? Before Brexit, it would have been about a tenner to wash this hat. Yeah, that's what Brexit has done. They can't get the chemicals. But do you remember before Brexit when there wasn't so much shit in the rivers? Do you remember that? Yeah, I do. One of the reasons why there's so much shit in the rivers is we can't get the chemicals that we need to break down the sewage as easily as we could and as cheaply as we could because of Brexit. Brexit is a direct driver to us having loads of shit in the rivers. Do you remember when you could get off the plane, didn't have to queue up for an hour and a half to get off? Yeah, the passport stamps. Yeah, do you remember when you just used to kind of just walk through, just as a flashes passport to them? Do you remember when you used to get on the Channel Tunnel and you just literally wind down the window and show your passport out the window? Like, you didn't even have to open it and they just nodded and then you drove onto the train. Do you remember that? I do. Patrick, it needs to be politically uncontroversial to say we should rejoin the EU. Until then, it's going to be a struggle. Yeah, and Patrick, you're right. But also, the closer we get to being part of the European club, the more that will happen. The more that people will say, well, what's the point of us being part of this kind of quasi-single market, but we don't get a say in the operation of it? Why don't we join the single market proper? And then if we do that, we want to be a rule maker, not a rule taker, obviously. So I think that one follows the other. And I'm not worried about people at the moment, 100% going, yes, we need to rejoin tomorrow. And all the people I've spoken to who want to rejoin the EU, they're all realistic about it. They're not saying it's going to happen in this parliament. It's not. It's just simply not. But what can happen is closer ties with the EU, and we can make a difference by just pointing out how much better things were and how much fewer shit there was in the rivers and how much easier it was to get a prescription and how shorter the queues were for the NHS and how much cheaper petrol was and how much cheaper energy was, electricity, and how much cheaper. Just generally pointing out how much better things were. Do you remember when you used to be able to get those £1 flights, the Ryanair flights to like Granada or somewhere, and you'd be able to stay in Spain and get really cheap car hire in Spain? Do you remember that? Yeah, that doesn't happen anymore because of Brexit. Honestly, it doesn't happen anymore. I mean, they might do like £10 flights, but then you've got loads of add-ons on the top of it. House of Leather has your hat on sale from £88 to £45. Ooh, that's cool. Yes, but is it kangaroo? See, this is the thing. There are hats like this, but they're made of cow leather. This is kangaroo leather, which is thinner. And therefore, when you wear it on a hot day, it's not as thick and it's not as heavy. So you don't sweat as much into it. For starters, says Yoni, the UK would need a codified constitution. That'll take more than a week, would it not? No, it doesn't. Why would it need a Why? The rules that the EU have laid down are like how to join the EU. They're not set in stone. They weren't handed down by God to Moses on the top of Mount Ararat. Was it Mount Ararat? One of them. Mount Sinai. Shit. Mount Ararat was where Noah's Ark ended up, I think. Graham, I wish you could be with me in Granada, says David. Patrick says, I remember £4 return flights on Ryanair. Yep, great. They were awesome. And also, they were there because of Brexit, because of the EU. And they've gone away because of Brexit. We've got Patrick saying it's going to be politically... I've said that one. Clean it yourself, Graham. FFS, it's not rocket science. Or try going to a saddlery to get a quote. It's possible it'll be cheaper. It won't be kangaroo hide. And also, I've tried to clean it myself. You can't. You go online and go, how do you clean this thing? And online, I'm just getting off the topic, but this winds me up. Everything you want to clean online, it's baking soda and white wine vinegar. Or white vinegar, or white vinegar. I don't know. It never works. It's bullshit. It's like, I just want a cleaning product that actually cleans it. Can I get that? Oh, no. You think that I want to just get the dirt off it. No. I want a proper cleaned. I want it cleaned. Yes, Graham, you know your biblical mountains. Thank you, Patrick McCall. I've been up Mount Sinai. I climbed it back in 1999 and watched the sunrise. And there's a picture of me holding some tablets, aspirin tablets. I thought it was funny at the time. 10 of them. Gary, oh no, it was only 2, wasn't it? 2 tablets. Oh, forget it. The British wrote Article 50. That's very true. Or some British guy wrote. I don't think it was all of us. I think we all got together. Yoni says 2 of the 5 exemptions the UK got last time involved modifying the constitution. Great. Yeah, fine. I mean, it's all up for negotiation, but I think you put the cart before the horse there when we talk about whether the EU will let us back. I don't even think it's a conversation worth having for another 5-10 years until the British people actually want to go back and there's enough fuss that people are making about how much better things were when we were part of the EU. Do you remember? There used to be more rainbows, I'm sure, when we were part of the EU. And people used to skip more when we were part of the EU. And they spent more time with their children, definitely. And less time looking at screens when we were part of the EU. And just make up any old bullshit. Just go make up some memes tonight saying, "Oh, do you remember this? Do you remember that? Do you remember that? Do you remember waterfalls used to just look beautiful when we were part of the EU? They're not as good now, probably because they're full of shit. To clean it, you need the giraffe tail," says Alan. Yes, you're absolutely right. What about wash it with Ariel? It doesn't work, and it shrinks the hat. I'm a hat that I travelled the first 130, 40 odd countries. And it's over there actually, and it's shrunk. It's embarrassing. It's this little weird little shriveled up husk of a hat because I tried to wash it. Chatty Rat says the community Aquis is a movable feast. There used to be 31 chapters, now there are 35. Yes, there's a long way to go. Yes, sugar free. There absolutely is, but I'm prepared to make the journey if you are. Actually, no, I'm going to make it anyway. But it'd be nice if you came along. What else have we got in here? We got what's finished for cold bucket of water. Yes, Duke says, I mean, my hat is made from felt, so it's probably infinitely more easier to clean. It's not actually the leather that's difficult to clean. It's the elastic. There's an elastic inside here, which after a few years, it's just a bit, just gets a bit manky. Needs tidying up. A few cold winters tip the balance with the public, says BUFU Mike. I hope you're not insinuating now if you got rid of some of if you remove the boomers. No, we're not talking about that. We still gotta help. Gary saying Graham's still upset about Mike not saying, I was still excited then. But I just got a message and I thought, oh great, Mike's there. We could start again at 9 o'clock, and we can actually have this conversation I want to have with the head of the European movement, which Mike is. But it's from Ben Chambers saying the remake of Speak No Evil is shite. Every worst fear realised. Commode is way off on this one. Okay. Total cop out. Well, there you go. I'm not watching that then. Thanks, Ben. Nothing to do with the EU, but there you go. Why don't we all turn up at Brussels and claim political asylum, says Steve S. You can't. As simple as that. You cannot claim asylum from the UK. It is not a country from which you can claim asylum. Unfortunately not. Mike got a better off. I don't know, he hasn't seen me message. Like, me ticks on WhatsApp are still on grey. They haven't turned to blue. So he's busy. He's doing stuff. We will do this show at some point. I'll probably put this onto private afterwards. It's just like, this is a bit of a weird one. Maybe I'll come back next week and it'll be episode 5A. Maybe. We will see. But like Sugarfree says, there is still a long way to go. But I am more than prepared to do whatever needs to be done in order to wake people up to the fact that life was better when we were part of the EU. And I want people to see that working together with our partners and friends, colleagues, relatives in the other countries of Europe is the way of the future. You know, Brexit is so backwards looking. It's trying to recreate this Britain of the empire and standing alone in the world. Britain never stood alone in the world. What do you think the fucking empire was, mate? You know, since 1600, we've had people in India stealing stuff from India. Britain hasn't ever stood alone in the world. We didn't stand alone in World War II. We had help from all the Commonwealth countries, now Commonwealth countries. Oh, eventually we had the Russians and the Americans coming on our side. I mean, we didn't stand alone. We didn't stand alone in World War I either. The idea that we did is kind of a very simplistic, I would say childlike vision of the past. And the fact that we couldn't make enough food in this country to feed ourselves even 100 years ago tells you everything you need to know. Like, we've always been reliant on other countries. We are no man is an island, and no island is a continent. It's just, you know, you completely rely on your friends and neighbours. I mean, even Australia, which is arguably an island continent, absolutely relies on its partnership deals with places like Japan and New Zealand and other countries in the Pacific Rim because they need to keep their economy afloat. I mean, the interdependency of the world is at once a great thing, and also it's something that we should really be promoting. And I will say this as a human being, we are a migratory species. That's why we left Africa in the first place. That's why we got as far as India, China, across to every single island in the Pacific Ocean somehow 2,000 years ago. That's how people got across into North America and all the way down into South America, all the way to Tierra del Fuego before Columbus turned up in his high heels in 1492. We are a migratory species. That's what we do. We move about. And what Brexit has done is not just inhumane, it's anti-human. It's taken our ability to roam freely around our own continent, which is the greatest continent in the world. I know we shouldn't really work in superlatives in this way, but just ask someone who's a big Brexiter who goes, oh yeah, Britain. Say to them, what's the best continent in the world? Because they will be at pain to say it's Europe, but it really is Europe. It is the one where every country is unique and different and interesting in its own little way. Even the little micro-states are kind of interesting in their own little way. Whereas in America, you've got, I don't know, LA, New York. I mean, New York's kind of interesting. LA is horrible. It's just a big concrete mess of traffic. I mean, it's great if you're a car, I guess. Sentient car. Otherwise, all right. Miami, same. Houston, Atlanta, Georgia. What's there? I mean, what's worth seeing in America? I don't want to go see Mount Rushmore. They're taking a sacred mountain and they defaced it with the faces of some presidents. I mean, no, some white guys. Not great. What else is there to see in America? Go to Florida, go to the Florida Keys. I suppose they're all right, but they're not as nice as the Caribbean, I don't think. I'm just biased, I guess, but I love the fact that I live in a continent where I can drive a couple of miles down the road and I'm in a different country with a different language and a different culture, different cuisine, different ways of doing things, different traditions. I love that. One of the problems I had when I lived in Australia was it was Australia in all directions. America's the same. It's America in all directions. You will get a burger in New York and you can drive all the way across America to California and everywhere you go, you'll eat the same burger. Well done, communism. Anyway, capitalism. I meant capitalism. What a mistake to make, thinking that everything being the same was a bit communist. So yeah, I love Europe. I think Europe is one of the best ideas humanity's ever had. And the European Union in particular is what is the best idea I think the humans have ever had. Because it means all these countries that have all their own ways of doing things working together for the benefit of all. And I want to be part of that. I want to be part of the club. Life was better. Beer was cheaper. There wasn't as much shit in our rivers. You didn't have to wait so long to see your doctors or your nurses, and there was no shortage of medicine. I mean, all this stuff has happened because we left the EU, as far as I'm concerned. And I won't take any arguments against what I just said. Sarah says Brexiters shouldn't be allowed to eat food from other countries. I was going to say Brexiters shouldn't be allowed to eat food. Food's too good for them. They can eat, I don't know, banana milkshake. There's a nice French statue in New York. Yeah, no, New York's an interesting place, but I mean, that's about it. That's about it. I can think about human ideas, says Ian. Like what? And the last country, the latest country to join EFTA was Liechtenstein in 1991. True. Guns. The US has lots of guns. You're not selling this to me, my friend. You're not selling me. Different country just down the road. Graham. It's called Yorkshire. Well, I was thinking of Scotland, but yeah, I'm in Durham at the moment, so Scotland's not very far. It's only a day's walk. 24 hours walk. Whereas when I'm in Liverpool, obviously Wales is just a stone's throw away. But I love that. I love the fact that we have these different cultures and different places to visit and experience, and the history of it is just remarkable. And one thing that America and Canada and Australia don't do is they don't celebrate their indigenous peoples enough. Like that should be foremost the thing that you think of when you think of Australia. And it is. You think of Australia, you think of boomerangs, you think of didgeridoos, you think of lime paintings, you think of Ayers Rock, which is Uluru, to give it its real name. And they're all to do with Aboriginal culture. And the fact that they don't sell that. What do they sell? Barbecues and beer. Do you know what? Australia, other countries have barbecues and beer. What does America sell? Hamburgers and Mickey Mouse. Okay. A mouse. All right. And hamburgers, which are from Hamburg. In Germany. Or maybe the French fries that you have with them. Or maybe the Coca-Cola, which uses coca leaves, which come from South America. So there's nothing in there particularly, in that very American meal is particularly American. Or maybe you'll get some pizza. Oh, yeah, that's Italian. So I just think that, like, yeah, all things being equal, I'm very, very glad that I was born in Europe. I just wish that I could make the most of my time here. I'm not here for a long time. I'm here for a good time. Alan Jackson, before we go, says, fun fact, a distant relative was asked by the king to settle Australia. Oops. Wolf Harris, hey. Durham always makes me think Pink Panther. Durham. Anyway, yeah, but pint of champagne, says Patrick McCarthy. Oh, God. My argument has been absolutely dismantled by Patrick McCarthy's pints of champagne. You missed racism, national Aussie pastime. I can't disagree with that. It's one of the reasons why I didn't want to live there. Okay, right. So, thank you very much for joining me on my own for this show with my gals. I'm going to change the title. I'm going to change the title to like 4A, episode 4, episode 4.5, 4.5. It's Graham talking about the EU. What is it? Because his guest didn't turn up. So I'll be back at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks for the chats. Thanks for the super chats. And until next time, I'll say give us a like on the way out. Why not? And hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.